Today we have with us Lawrence Cumberbatch. Lawrence was an activist with the Brooklyn Congress of Racial Equality. His recollections have been featured Brooklyn Historical Society's blog, on the Huffington Post, on StoryCorps, and many other venues. So we're really lucky to have him here to give us his personal recollections about being a part of this very important civil rights organization in Brooklyn in the 1960s. And I won't tell you too much more. I'll let him take care of that.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the year 1963. At that time, I was 16 years of age, and what happened over the summer changed my life for a good. I was born and raised in Brooklyn. I lived in Bedford-Stuyvesant, and then subsequently I lived in Flatbush. I've lived in Brooklyn my entire life. I have 2 brothers and a sister. We're all still here, thank God. My parents are gone. I've lived around this area so much that I know everything about it. My wife and I, our son was born in this hospital across the street, and we've all stayed here in Brooklyn. At the time, in 1963, I spent most of my most of my summer going to the national office of the, going to the Brooklyn office of the CORE. CORE is the Congress of Racial Equality at that time. And what got me there is on the evening news every evening, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock during the summer, they were always not forecasting, but showing up here at the Brooklyn hospital. Let me just get myself clear here. Let me back up. In the summer of '63, the state was building the dormitories for the downstate medical center for their students in the medical school. Because of the nightly newscasts covering the picket line that CORE had set up, because there was no jobs given to blacks and Puerto Ricans when they were building the downstate facilities that we were hoping we'd get the jobs on. Out of that, I was going to the office, not office, but to the picket line. Every day I would get up at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, go to the picket line, stay there for the whole day. At the end of the day, we would go back to the office where CORE had their office on Nostrand Avenue in Brooklyn. As a consequence of this, and spending all this time in the summer on these picket lines, I was asking my parents if they would let me literally walk to Washington with the other people that were going in CORE, from Brooklyn to DC, when we were going to have the big March on Washington on August 28th, 1963. That was the day that we were going to have the march at the not the office, the, I'm sorry for being nervous. But of Washington Monument and Lincoln. I was 16 years old when I saw TV news about Brooklyn CORE in the summer of 1963, which was picketing the downstate hospital dormitories being built on the premises for this MD students. Thereafter, I went and joined the picket line daily, and daily returned to the Corps office to talk about what was going to be done further on the next day. Subsequently, they talked about walking to Washington. Now let me go back to this. Corps this is on Nostrand Avenue in Bedford-Stuyvesant. That was their office. They were always the ones that started something to get news and people to come and see what we were doing at these different demonstrations. They always wanted to make sure that other people were going to see this and make these people come and join us. That's what Brooklyn Corps did. It was one of the most active chapters of the Corps. Corps was a semi-national organization regarding life on the issue of color and race in this country. So at this time that we were walking on the picket lines at the hospital, where we're building the dormitories, I then stayed up with the people in Brooklyn Corps by going back to their office every night after we had the picket line. And out of that method of working and walking back to the office, etc., I decided that when they said they were going to walk to Washington for the August 28th event, I asked my father and mother if they would let me go. At first they said no, 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 and then they said, well, I guess you could handle yourself. So I went. Now, going was really hard. Now the difference was I was the youngest person on the line. I had nobody else to tell me what to do. I was 16. There were about 20 of us when we first left. We walked everywhere. There was no transportation. I think there were 16 to 20 of us. Most of them dropped off. By the time we got to Washington, let me just jump ahead, Ed. By the time we got to Washington, there were about 7 or 8 of us. But the bottom line is getting to Washington. First of all, the state of New Jersey would not let us walk along the turnpike. So we had to use an alternate method, and that was going to US 1, which is what they had before they had the turnpikes. 2, we weren't allowed to stop at a lot of places along the turnpike, not the turnpike, but US 1 is what we had to go to. We weren't allowed to go into a lot of places. We got positions when we were leaving. Let me go back and stop for a moment. When we walked, we would figure out when we were going to stop and eat, when we were going to find places where we could sleep, and when we were going to find out what the next was going to happen on the next day. We didn't have any motels. We basically pitched tents every night. We didn't go to restaurants. We cooked on fires instead of that. There were times that we weren't allowed to use any facilities at the stops along the US 1. If they didn't want you, they tell you can't go in here, you can't go in there. So at the bottom of the line was basically 13 days that we took to walk to Washington. One of the things that was interesting is one town in New Jersey would refuse to let us stop. They told us that they weren't going to let us stop in their community, so we had to move to another place. When we got to Delaware. All right? They told us at the state lines, the Delaware police told us that they were going to escort us through their state because we weren't going to let us stop. They're not going to let us go to the bathroom. You're not going to be able to stop in the state. So they hooked us in front and back. They had marked cars to make sure that we didn't go anyplace else except that we have to walk straight through the state of Delaware and be off their property before sunset. So we had to go with that. Let me just give you a little prologue of what this was all about. In the summer of 1963, having seen daily television news coverage of Corps picketing for the hiring of blacks and Puerto Rican workers for the construction jobs at downstate SUNY site for student dormitories in East Flatbush, Brooklyn, New York, I joined the picket line daily and returned to the office of Corps on Ocean Avenue at the end of each day. Well, I had no idea of joining up with Corps, i.e. I was only 16 years of age and not an adult. I spent the rest of the summer with this regiment up to and including August 28, 1963, March on Washington. What I learned by this association changed my life to the extent that I found people who set aside their personal concerns, i.e. family and personal time and after work, to struggle for social change which would not necessarily benefit them. At the time, this selfless dedication to a cause was eye-opening inasmuch as the planning and execution of the strategy was accomplished by this rational discussions among the members of Corps without egocentric fights and or pitfalls. The goals were always the key that settled all arguments, not who was right. I learned how to be a leader by listening to the other side and acknowledging their concerns and or how the mutual goals could still be achieved, i.e. you do not always exclusively have all of the answers. You know, what Brooklyn Corps has led to. 1, set an example for ordinary people exercising their combined efforts to change their situations through the use of mass media, i.e. publicity on the Corps 1964 World's Fair, stalling on the New York City highways, and the March on Washington in 1963. Now in this part here I'm referring to, the Brooklyn Corps was, in the summer of '63, they got more news coverage than anybody else would had at any time in New York in that summer. Because what they would do is they would do things that would draw the newspapers and the TV people out to the sites that they wanted to be seen at. And they always wanted to have prestige, not prestige, but the news people to see what they were doing. They were always out there to try and get people to see what they were doing and to listen to them when they were stopped for doing this and stopped for doing that. And that was one of the things that they always did. Now for an example, even though I'm jumping ahead here, the same Brooklyn Corps that was dealing with March on Washington, in the next year it was the Corps that stayed away from the World's Fair. They tried to stop the World's Fair in Flushing, Queens, because they weren't getting working jobs on the sites in terms of the property that was being developed for the World's Fair, the jobs for building, etc. So that was one of the things that they did. Aside from that, we also did, and I did part of this with them when I was 16. We had a rent strike in Bedford-Stuyvesant. It went on for about 6 months, at least 6 months. And we basically got a lot of changes in Bedford-Stuyvesant. And out of that, what we did in Brooklyn Core, out of that residue, they had a formal new corporation, professional, not an office corporation. This is the Bedford-Stuyvesant Restoration Corporation, which was there to bring back good benefits that the Bedford-Stuyvesant had for people who could afford less rent than other people would often have made available. Some of the other things that became part of what I found out of being in Brooklyn Core. I don't know if many of you have any recollections of the George Wiley, who founded the welfare rights movement in 1966. That was something that was really a different ballgame for everybody, because that was about how much people could get on welfare, on quotes, because nobody uses the word to welfare anymore. So that was one of the things that Brooklyn Core helped to do, because Wiley was the one who organized the welfare rights movement in 1966. And he got his positions differently because he was a member of CORE, and that was where he was brought up. Other things that we did in Brooklyn Core, we had I think 2 days we spent going to the help of people in Nassau County, not Nassau County, Suffolk County, the tenant farmers. All right, these were people who were shifted around by basically almost like slaves. And they would go from one part of the country in Brooklyn, and not Brooklyn, but in Queens, not Queens, but the ends of Staten Island, the end of Long Island, where they would come from different states, but all of them were basically Latino from the South America. And they were used like slaves to go from one place to another place, all up and down the Eastern Seaboard. And we, meaning people that I was involved with Brooklyn Core, we went and saw the way they were living, and we brought them food, we brought them drinks, we gave them all the attention that we could to show our sympathy and to make them see that they could move on by doing better things than what they were forced to do at that point in time. Now, the other thing that Brooklyn Core really did that made a lot of difference is what I said before, is the attention that we brought to the discrimination in employment for the construction industry in New York City. Now, that's something that, even in all these years, 50 years past, that still has not been resolved. I mean, naturally, it's been evolved. I mean, it's been improved, but how many non-white people are at these different construction sites from all around the world, and people who are here and have their lives here, they can't get jobs, right? That's still the same way. It may not be as bad as it was 40, 50 years ago, but it's still the same way. If you go to any of these job sites, it's just a speckling of people of color. And these are the job sites that these people make $100,000, $150,000. These are laborers. I mean, they're people that they can do things with their feet and their hands. Well, there are a lot of people who can do that, but that doesn't always get to everyone like that. The other thing I would just I'm bringing up, and then you can start asking me questions, and maybe I can flesh out better what I should be saying. What I always liked and admired about Brooklyn Core is that I was 16. I'm in an environment with everyone is like at least 25, 30, 40. They have children not my age, but a little bit younger than me. And I always made an impression that when the members of Brooklyn Core, when we were doing the boycotting and walking lines in Flatbush, etc., there was always a need to have some kind of decorum where we know what we're going to do, and then somebody else says, no, we do want to do it this way, and then the third person says, well, we're going to do it that way. Well, however that was always resolved, it was resolved quiet, it's without screaming at each other, it was without threatening anyone. They will always show that they could just talk it out. We were all trying to do the same thing. Everybody didn't have to be a boss. Some people said, hey, I'll follow. And that's fine. So, I mean, I came up with that and I had such envy for how these people did it. I mean, I was a kid. I'm 16 years of age, but these are the adults. And there was no screaming and yelling at each other. They dealt with each other with respect. They said, we're going to get this job, we're going to get it done. And I've always lived with that. You don't have to be the boss for everybody. You can listen and you can help. If people see that you are willing to bide your time, that's all the better. Okay. Some of the things that I found is that like, a lot of people came through this set of Brooklyn Core. Do you see Congressman Major Owens? He was one of the leaders of Brooklyn Core at that time, back in '63. He then went into the Congress years later. Another person that I worked with, these are all people that I knew at the age of 16, because we were all the same. Stanley Bresloff, who's been a deputy mayor, he's been so many things around New York City. He was part of the Port Authority and part of the big hospital fund, the CEO of Continuum, the hospital management organization. And this is a guy who walked the picket lines on the site in Brooklyn. There's one that I was talking to in terms of 1963 when we were walking the lines in Brooklyn. He was there on the lines. You know? So there's a lot of things that have been of consequence. I'm sorry that I'm not being too distinguished in how I'm presenting this, but it's hard to just try and pack up at all these things and not say, well, hold it, I should have done that, I should have done something else, so you forgive me that, okay? Now, here's something that may be interesting. Tell me when you want me to stop.
Do you want to take questions?
Let me just read you what I have here. What I did when I was walking to Washington, literally walking to Washington, I kept a diary, and then I transferred it once I got home. So this is what I brought on me when I was walking to Washington. So I'm going to read you this one, okay? Freedom Walk to Washington began 5:30 a.m. Thursday, August 15th, 1963, Downstate Medical Center, Route 1-130-4. That's because we couldn't use the turnpikes. Where we were at this time, New Jersey, Thursday, these are the dates I put down. Rahway, had to leave by sunset. police order. They were gonna come walk us through. They did. We said, you stop here, and you were not gonna do anything else but walk across this. I think it was maybe like 3 or 4 miles. They had one car in the back and one in the front, and we couldn't stop for anything. We couldn't stop for eating. We couldn't stop to go to the bathroom. They said, you're leaving, and you're leaving our town. So this was Rahway. Had to leave by sunset. Police order, Woodridge. It's the first campsite that we then had that evening in another place. Now, Friday, Stranger gave us $20 contribution. Colonial Gardens was where we slept. What we did is we pitch camped every night. We didn't stay in motels or anything else. We had backpacks and we pitch camp. Most of what we ate was junk food along the highways, you know, like butter, nuts, and that kind of thing, and soda, and all the things that we didn't really need, but we had them. Next thing I see here is a Saturday, now the third day, and Dr. Smith bought supplies and gave us $50 contribution. And then we have a note here that we stopped and had a set third campfire, not campfire, but campsite in Hightstown, New Jersey. And then I have Sunday, and the next was Bordentown, quote unquote, and this is how they had it back then, colored resort, meaning a place for like a mobile lodge, but it was colored, is what picked me up, okay? And that was our 4th campsite. And then Monday, Camden State Police Barracks. Oh, this week we had to actually what happened is we got off the road too late when we were walking in Camden, but the state police, they were nice to us. This was New Jersey, Camden. They said, hold it, you can come to our barracks. But what we didn't know is once we got in their barracks, we were sleeping in the bathroom. Okay. But there wasn't any down for them. They were just giving us space that we would get off the road, and so we were happy for that. Tuesday, Bridgeport, truck siding, mosquitoes, this one, the 6th campsite. Wednesday, Penns Grove, hamburger and pastries, lunch, free at quote-unquote colored restaurant. Deepwater, DuPont Park had reneged upon the promise that we could have a campsite. They didn't want us to stop, and they wouldn't do. The park administration would not allow us to camp in the park overnight. So what happened is someone down the road made a call, and a person let us use their personal property for our campsite for that night. Thursday, across Delaware on a Memorial Bridge, proceeded to walk through Delaware in one day because the state police said that we couldn't stop, and we didn't. Elkton was the town that we then came to. That was our 8th campsite in Maryland. And then on Friday, Perryville, Susquehanna Bridge, people from Aberdeen picked us up and took us to dinner and a campsite in Aberdeen. Okay, that was one of the things that we would occasionally have that benefit. People would come out and meet us, aside from news and anything like that, about food and where we could stop and where we could get this and could get something else. Let's see. Saturday, taken back to Susquehanna Bridge. In other words, we were helped that evening before, and we crossed the bridge, and then we went to the people that we were sleeping with that night, and we went back the next morning back to where we were left off in pursuing the walk to Washington. So we went back to the Susquehanna Bridge and walked. We camped in Edgewood and somebody made insulting remarks to us, and a warrant was taken out for him because he basically threatened us. So the police and the highway patrol they took him into custody and put out a warrant for him. And then the next day, Sunday, reached Parkville, 5 miles from Baltimore, in late afternoon. Were driven to Baltimore for a party and brought back to the campsite that night. That was our 11th campsite. A Monday, walked to and through Baltimore for the, quote, park rally in honor of Bill Moore. I don't have any recollection of what the person being honored, what that was about, but back then, I certainly sure that they knew what this was about, but I don't have a recollection of it myself. And we subsequently continued on to Laurel campsite, received new sweatshirts and pants. That's because these things were so terrible after all these months on the road. That's why I give you some of these things here. Let me just say. All right, these are all things these are the things that I had here. This is the shirt I wore. Okay. Here, this is nice. I like to talk about this. Brooklyn Corps office. There was a what would I call it? Like this camping store. You know, next door there was a guy you could buy different things for fixing stuff and etc. Why I did this I didn't know. But to walk to Washington, I decided I needed some good shoes. So at the age of 16, my sense of good shoes is I ended up with plastic shoes. How I found out it was plastic is because when we were going to using fire on the highway to Washington, we were firing up the wall, firing up food, etc. After we got off the road. I got too close to the fire one night, and that's when I realized that these weren't leather. These started burning. Okay, and this is how good they were. This is for 250 miles. This is what I had by the time we came back. This is what I had. I've had these all that time. And this is, like I said, this is the sweatshirt that I wore. Now, yeah, so we walked across once we got to Baltimore, passed through there in pants and sweatshirts. That's what I was showing to you there. But even though these weren't the ones that, these were the ones that were old. The new ones, I don't even know what happened to the new ones. So the night before the actual march on Washington, we went and had accommodations in Washington, D.C. And then in the morning, we were taken back to the line where we crossed over to come into Washington, and we walked across the bridge and into the monument area after that day. Found lodging, etc. And then we resumed the walk, like I said, from State Line through D.C. to Washington Monument and the Lincoln Memorial Mausoleum. The other thing is that this is the part that I was so enthused is that when we entered the park, not the park, but the position where the March on Washington was going to be, that's where they have the one feature at one end, and then the pools that go like 3-4 blocks long, and you have the other part of the Washington Monument, etc. So this is where we ended up in the August 28th, when the demonstration was called to order and everyone was doing what we all did. Everybody had a hat because it was hot. People, so many people was just inspiring. Everybody was happy. Everybody saw that we could do something. It was something that, because I was on the podium behind the stage like everybody else, not like everybody else, but like everybody that was doing something on the stage, I was back there with them. And it was just incredible to see the people, the mass of people that you just couldn't see anything else as far as you could see. I can't forget that. I'm open to anything you want to ask me, okay? I haven't done it professionally, but it's hard, okay? Ask me questions, I'll be happy to answer. Well, because Brooklyn Core, they went out and they registered people who had problems with their landlords. I mean, roach infested, vermin infested. Brooklyn Core took that up. They actually took it up. They helped the people go to the proper administrations to address these things. They were there. I mean, that was the thing. They were there. These were people that, what I always liked, I mean, I love these people. I mean, in retrospect, I was the oldest, the youngest one. I mean, because I wasn't like somebody, my mother or father, so I was on my own with these grown-ups. And what I loved is that they always argued, but it was decent, it was loving. It wasn't, I'm going to kill you, I'm not going to call you this, I'm going to call you out of your name. That didn't happen, all right? And these people were mothers and fathers. They abandoned part of their family so they could do this. I mean, these are the people I remember. I went, when I was walking the picket lines in the day, in the summer of 63, I would always go back to the Brooklyn Core office and just observe them. I mean, I wasn't a member of Brooklyn Core. I'm 16. What the hell was that? Okay, but I would sit back and I would listen to them. And like I said, these are the people who ended up being big people. I mean, Brezhnev, Owens. These people were nurtured in Brooklyn Core, and it's like it's something that it's something that you have to know, and you can't forget it, because you see what people were able to do. People cared. They weren't about myself. These people weren't fighting about who's going to get the name on the bottom of the TV that night, who got into the picture. That never happened with us. Never happened with us. We had guys who knew a lot of things, and they were humble. So I've always appreciated that. I have basically, I think I've been fit to my son, and because of my own experience, I knew that you have to trust him. And my only thing is like my father did to me. He would say, well, look, you can make sure you take care of yourself. You know, I'm trusting you to do what you ought to do. And he did. But one of the things, this is just something as I think about these things, one of the things that I had going for me at 16 to get permission to go walk this line to the south is there's always, like I told somebody else, there's always someone in the family that everybody respects. And in my case, it was my Uncle Lloyd. Now, he was a guy who came up from Pittsburgh, and he drove trolleys for transit, and he went back to school. He got his diploma, he got a law degree, and he ended up being the secretary for the New York City Transit Authority. Okay? And he's a man who said, look, this is what you can do, you do it. And that's what he did. And I always appreciated him because he would let us, meaning the children, he would listen to us. It wasn't like, oh, you just slap your hand and walk away. He listened, and he would say, hey, you know, that sounds good to me. So I had to call upon him when I wanted to do things in terms of this March on Washington, et cetera, and walking the road. I knew that my mother and father respected my mother's brother, and that's Lloyd, and that they would do whatever he said, and that's exactly what he did. They called him, and my parents called him and said, "Hey, you got to talk to Lawrence and get him out of this," and blah, 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 blah. And he said, "Well, you know," he says, "have Lawrence come up to my office," because at that time he was secretary for the Port, not the Port Authority, the Transit Authority over here on, by the town, the Brooklyn court. He said, "have him come up to my office," because that's where he had his office for the Transit Authority. And this is my uncle I'm referring to. And he had brought me into his office. He says, "I can tell you, Lawrence, tell me what you're going to do in terms of camping out and walking to Washington." So I explained it to him, blah, 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 blah. He says, "Okay, I'll see what I can do." I said, "Okay, thanks." Next thing I know, he told my parents, and he said, "Look, the boy knows what he's doing. Leave him alone. Let him go. Nothing will happen." And God bless him. It worked. It worked. Yes.
When you got to Washington, it sounds like a lot more people joined you. Was there a big rally?
Yeah, because, well, what they did is they had people who let us sleep in their basements, et cetera, until we could come up the next day in terms of going back to the site where the march was going to end up. But that was basically what it was. There was nothing more than that. We had to basically go back to across the river from Washington because there was no other place to go, so we had to go places that people were willing to open their doors to us, knowing that we were just going to be out there to sleep and get up and go back to Washington and finish the march into the program.
And did you get rides back to
Yes.
New York?
Yes, yes, yeah, we got rides back, you got that right.
I was just wondering, was the group that you were with, the people you said there was a lot of like mixing of ideas, were they more influenced by like Martin Luther King with like peaceful protests and unity, or more by like Malcolm X's Black Power?
Well, with Brooklyn Core, it was basically peaceful. They weren't talking about walking around with billy clubs or guns. That was not part of it. You see, because Core didn't deal with that. They didn't deal with people who. Core basically came out of the sense that this is the pacifist way to do things. The pacifist way. You're not going to beat people up. You're not going to shoot people. You're not going to wear guns. They didn't do that. They didn't do it. And that was basically background.
Were there any white people helping you on?
Oh yes, there were white people that were part of the war.
Oh.
Yeah. This guy Arnie, can't think of his last name. Goldwag, you got it. Yeah. He was the man. He was the man. He would do anything. He had every trick he could to get what he wanted, and everybody's surprised. But he did everything, and it came out the right way. He didn't worry about it. He says, "Hey, I can get that done," and he would come back with it. He would do that. Don't ask me what I did, but I just done it. Great guy. I remember when I was 16 in the summer, I was riding my bicycle. I had a 10-speed, and I would go all over. I had gone up as far as Yonkers on my bicycle. This is when I was 16, and I remember that. I was riding on Atlantic Avenue going out towards Queens, and I was crossing along this highway. And when I came to a stoplight, these guys came out, a bunch of white guys. They came out of the bushes and beat me up. And they had broke my chin, etc. And that didn't break it, but they opened up a scar on my chin, still here. And a white guy who owned a gas station across the road. He saw what happened. He said, hey, here's where you can go down so-and-so and go to the house. You can get off there and you can get into, go to the police precinct. Well, I did that. I went there and I went to the precinct. And when I got there, I said, well, this is what happened to me. What the hell are you doing out here? What are you doing out here for anyway? I said, what do you mean? I said, I'm going on right. He said, what are you doing out here? This is a white guy, the desk officer. And he was belligerent towards me. I'm bleeding, and he's not worried about that. He's telling me, what am I doing out there? Like, this is an apartheid state. I have to get permission to go from one part of Brooklyn to another part. But this is what was happening. This is 1963.
Why couldn't you drive to DC?
Because I was 16.
I mean, as a group.
Huh?
As
Well, but we
before.
didn't want it. You see, the whole thing was to show that was the whole thing. It wasn't like we couldn't get on the buses. This was a way of attracting people. That's what I was saying. Brooklyn Core was always looking to get people's attention. It wasn't that they couldn't get buses. No, they wanted people to see. They wanted people to see this, to remind people that this is an event that's going to happen. And they've always did that. I mean, they went to the World's Fair, and it was a big deal. You know, this was 1964. And I remember this is the guy that we had in Core, Arnie. He was always a trickster. So they were supposed to, the Brooklyn Core was talking about snarling the highways that would go past or get to Flushing, where the World's Fair was for 64. And Arnie Golwag, this guy who was in the Brooklyn Core, he says, well, I'm going to get in there, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to store my car in the middle of the highway before you can get to the World's Fair site. This jerk, well, he didn't know what he was talking about. He couldn't do a thing. He had one car. The highway is like 4 lanes. So there was nothing he could do in terms of trying to foil or somehow get attention from the news, because he's done something regarding people being accessed to the World's Fair. So he couldn't do anything about it. But he was the only one who was trying to do something like that. They didn't bother us, basically. Honestly, they really didn't. They didn't want to. They didn't want to. I mean, even when they were sitting down at downstate, when I said I was picketing the line for jobs for black and Puerto Rican workers, they never said, well, I'm going to put you in jail. They just said, hey, look, you have to move along. You can't stop here. And then we did it. You know, we didn't hobble them and try and make their job hard. We usually were good friends with anybody that we dealt with. That's how Paul was. It wasn't nasty. It wasn't bitter. You know, it wasn't like that. You know, even if people spit at you, we didn't have that much. Maybe once or twice on a walk to Washington, I got that. But it didn't reach me, so there's nothing to do, nothing to say.